Patten.
Thank you, President, and I'm pleased to rise to the Parliament Appropriation Bill 2021. And I think before I move on to some of the other aspects, I certainly would just like to thank everybody for what an extraordinary year this has been. I know that it's for our community, it has been tough. I know for many of us in this chamber, it has been tough, and we have had to change the way we work, and we've had to do things very differently, and our staff have had to do things very differently, and they've had to deal with a lot of new things, and this has been an extraordinary learning curve, I think, for our staff. They have learned to work very differently, but do it very effectively. And in this Parliament, which has been closed to the public, this beautiful building that has been closed to the public for most of this year, Mr. Finn, I don't feel like I've missed a moment with you this year. I feel like we've spent plenty of time. Probably enough time together, but more than enough. We can both agree that we'll be happy when we spend some time apart again, I suspect. But apart from that, I think in fact, we have sat for. It's been a very rare day that we have not sat to the chamber, and that the staff here have made that possible, and I think that's been extraordinary. Whether it's been working in Team A and Team B to ensure that we can operate this Parliament as safely as possible, and I really feel that we did do that. For most of us, we were in here for all of the sitting days that were on the schedule. But this meant some extraordinary creative thinking and lateral thinking from the staff of this Parliament, and they have done that extraordinarily. And I look at my work in the committees, and we have undertaken probably more public hearings than we would have in other years. We have enabled the public to share in that. So, it might have been a time, and in another time when we might have, for homelessness, for example, we might have travelled to Finland to see how they solved homelessness. But this time we brought Finland to Victoria, and we were able to share the conversations that we could have with the Finnish, with people from around the world, via our public hearings that the committee held, and the public could play a part in that. I think the way that the Parliament has enabled us to engage with the public during this time has been very different, and something I hope that we don't lose once once COVID has passed. I hope that many of the things that we have done we continue to do that. I'm still waiting to see a new website for the Parliament, but I understand, yet again, it is on its way, almost there. But certainly the technology and the way that we've been able to work has really been able to be escalated incredibly quickly. So I'd particularly like to thank everyone who's made that possible, from the IT crew through to Greg and his team here, to all of the clerks and all of the staff in the Tables office who've managed to provide us with the information that we normally would have received face to face in electronic ways. And I would especially like to recognise the committees and the committee staff. For many of them, they have been working from their homes since March. They have almost been on house arrest since March, and I think that's been incredibly tough. So I'm hoping that they all get a very good break come next week, or certainly for January, and have some really good time when they can at least get out of their homes and travel around the state and around the country. I'd also like to thank my own electorate staff who, for not a day did they miss a beat in responding to emails, in working hard from sometimes from the electorate office, but more often from home. So I thank them all. I noted Mr. Rich Phillips in the starting of his remarks when he talked about the appropriation for Parliament, and that we are in the same position as we were 12 months ago, that we come to the realisation that no, we haven't funded the Parliament, and particularly the Legislative Council, to the degree that it is required. And there's this scrambling in these last few days and few weeks leading up to this debate, where that funding is found, where problems are solved, where, and as I understand today, we certainly had a considerable shortfall for the council, and particularly for council committees. I appreciate the Speaker in the other House, and certainly I appreciate the President and the work of the Parliamentary Services to enable some fast action in shuffling funds to ensure that the Council and the Council's committees can operate properly for the next 6 months. And I hope that in the May budget that we'll be able to ensure that this doesn't happen again, that there is solid, continuous funding and recognition that this is a House of review, that this is a House that its committee processes are incredibly important. This is a House where the committee process and the committees have resulted in policy change, have resulted in real change that affects people's lives. And I know many of us who are part of committees understand the importance of that work. And outside this velvet chamber, the collaborative and often consensual approach that we take to problem solving in that committee process. And it's something that I think the community doesn't see enough, although I think, through COVID they've managed to see a lot more of that. And I certainly am pleased to see that my concerns about the shortfalls in our budgets have been amended. However, this is something that we need to maintain, and this is something that I will be seeking absolute assurances that we know that this Parliament is funded and funded well. And that goes to the other points of this appropriation bill, which is around the other organisations that are the conscience of government. As I say, this is the House of Review, and this is where we provide that conscience to the government. The Parliament is not the government. And then we see independent organisations like IBAC and the Ombudsman's Office asking for more money and it's this bizarre situation where you've got people who are providing that oversight to government behaviour, to government actions, to us in this chamber. We are deciding if they get paid. We are deciding what sort of funding they will have. Now, I've actually been, I thank the Treasurer's Office. I've had numerous conversations with them over the last few weeks, and they have provided me with, I think, adequate assurance that for the time being, until we get to the next budget in May, that IBAC and the Ombudsman's Office will be funded appropriately, will be funded as they desire and in their way. But this raises this important point, that the Parliament is not the government. IBAC, the Ombudsman, these are the conscience. This is the oversight of government, yet government decides how they are funded. And I would like to see that change. I think this is time for us to look at an independent committee, maybe a parliamentary committee, that looks at how we fund and what we fund the Parliament for. Because I can imagine a day when the Parliament may decide that the parliamentary committees don't need funding, Now, that would be difficult in the current makeup of this parliament for that type of decision to pass, but there may be time in the future where governments may not want this parliament to run as effectively and as efficiently as it does. They may not want it to, so they may reduce that funding, and it is up to the government and the executive to make that decision. The government and the executive makes that decision about IBAC, about the Ombudsman, about this very chamber. Now, I see that in other jurisdictions that's not the case. If you look at Canada, if you look at Scotland, if you look at the UK, there is independent review of the funding of the independent bodies that provide that scrutiny of government. So it's something that I will continue to pursue. But in saying that and in finishing, I believe that we have not, this is not perfect, but we have scrambled together to find the right funding for this chamber, for this council, which I'm very pleased about, although I believe it needs more, and I will be campaigning and working on that in the coming months leading up to the next budget. And the same for IBAC and the Ombudsman. I have been given in writing assurances from the Treasurer that both of those organisations will get the funding that they want, and we can reassess and we can work on this to ensure that this happens in May. I've always said when I've come into this House that I'm here to push the reasons, policies and the platform that I was elected on. I'm not the government, and I'm not the opposition either. I'm not an opposition. I am here to provide scrutiny, to hold the government to account, but also to advocate for my community and advocate for the platform that I was elected on. So I don't, quite often I feel troubled about amending government bills such as this.